Hi everyone, welcome to the session on Azure Active Directory B2C Identity Protection and Conditional Access. My name is Razi Rais. I'm a Senior Program Manager in Microsoft Identity Engineering team.
And my name is Navdha Sethi, and I'm also Program Manager in Microsoft Identity Engineering team.
Azure Identity Protection is a premium feature of Azure AD B2C, which enables organizations to detect, remediate, and investigate risk. Let's explore the role of risk types and risk levels in Azure Identity Protection. There are two types of risks, sign-in risk and the user risk. A sign-in risk represents the probability that a given authentication request isn't authorized by the entity owner and hence compromised. The sign-in risk can be calculated in real time or offline using Microsoft's internal and external threat intelligence sources. The user risk, on the other hand, is a probability that a bad actor has compromised a particular user identity. Azure Identity Protection categorizes risk into three levels: low, medium, and high. While Microsoft doesn't provide specific details about how risk level is calculated, but each level brings higher degree of confidence that the user or a sign-in is compromised. Azure Identity Protection detects a variety of risk based on machine learning, heuristics, and through the use of various Microsoft partner products. For example, we have password spray, atypical travel, anonymous IP address, and many more risk detections available today in identity protection for Azure AD B2C. Microsoft also adds new type of risk detections periodically to stay current with cybersecurity threat landscape. Now, Navdha, can you help us understand how conditional access policies work with identity protection to remediate the risk?
Thanks, Razi. We will now see how conditional access policies leverage these identity protection signals that Razi just talked about. Conditional access is the next generation policy in the cloud security space. It is like a control panel that looks at various identity protection signals in both real-time and offline and makes sure that the right controls are enforced. It checks risk levels for users, locations, and apps. You can decide the level of risk from a combination of high, medium, or low that is acceptable for granting access to the type of the service. You can create conditional access policies and apply them to your external users, including business partners and customers. This is even more important in the CIM world, as now we have a huge outburst of apps, unlike the olden times where there used to be just a few apps. And of course, it's not enough to just detect risks. The system needs to know how you want to mitigate and remediate a specific risk event, for example, requiring MFA or forcing a password reset, thus greatly reducing man-in-the-middle attacks. Once you have your conditional access policies configured, it allows the security teams to focus on more sophisticated risk events. Hence, you can see you can get tons of benefits by using conditional access policies to keep your organization and users safe.
In this walkthrough, we are going to explore how to use conditional access policies with identity protection in Azure AD B2C. We're also going to discuss options available for administrators to investigate user and sign-in risks. Let's take a look into how to investigate risks from administrator standpoint. We are inside the Azure Portal's B2C page. Now locate the security pane on the left and you will notice risky users and risk detections as two options available.
Let's start with seeing how we can set up conditional access policies. I am in the Azure AD B2C tenant, so I will go to the conditional access plate, and here you can see I've already set up some policies for the demo purpose, but it's highly recommended that we set up separate policies for the different conditions, like a separate one for risk, separate one for user risk, separate one for sign-in risk, and separate one for location-based risks. And the other recommendation is to minimize on these policies, so it is good if we can apply them to all apps if possible. So let's go inside the high, medium sign-in risk policy and see how this has been set up. So initially you just have to give a name, then the users and groups you want this to apply to. So in my case, it's all users, and I've excluded the global administrator. From the application point of view, this has been configured for all cloud apps, and again I've excluded the Microsoft Azure Management app so that I don't get locked out. And because this was a sign-in risk policy, so the sign-in risks have been configured, and I've configured high and medium. And once you've set this up, you have the option to run it in report-only mode, where you can just look at the risky users and risky sign-in reports to analyze how it's going on, but your actual end users will not see this into effect. But if you want, you turn it on when you really want to turn it on, and in my case, it's on for now. And similarly, you have this high, medium user risk policy setup. And in this policy, like the grant type is requires a password change because user risk is usually much more crucial. So we would need a password risk preferably to remediate that action. And then you go into your user flow tab. So you have to configure a user flow. That's one way if you want to use built-in templates. And this is again already set up. But here there are a few things you need to keep in mind. So you have to make sure that your MFA enforcement method is conditional. And the type of method could be anything from email to SMS or phone call. But for the purpose of demo, we have chosen SMS or phone call. And you have to enable this conditional access flag basically. And once this is done, we can run the user flow. So we are using a demo application to run this. And I'll show you two things. So first I will simulate the risky sign-ins. And for that, I will use a Tor browser because that's going to behave like an anonymous IP. And the user will be prompted to enter MFA. So let's use a Tor browser to simulate the risky sign-in. And I will use a user account from here. So let's say I use Sandy Paul. And behind the scenes, identity protection is kicking in. And what it's doing is it's sending a code. And once the user Sandy Paul has second factored, the user will be able to log in. And here we see that the token is issued and the user was now successful. So let's now try to simulate a risky user. So I'll take this user John Doe, and if you look into the logs in the risky users, we can see this user John Doe, he has a high risk level. So now irrespective of my Tor browser, if I just sign in from a normal regular browser, I will still be asked to second factor. And in this case, as you saw in the setup, it will be an MFA plus a password reset because in the case of risky users, we need a password reset. So I'll go back to my user flows. And in this case, run the user flow again, but this time from my regular browser. And I'll sign in as John Doe. So again, I have been asked to second factor through phone. So I will enter the SMS code. And once I've done this, because this was a risky user, I have to also reset the password. And see, now the user has been successfully again able to log in and the token was issued. We can also do a similar thing through IAF, through custom policies. So here is where you have your sample conditional access policy written using custom policies, which has already the starter pack included. So once you have that, you could deploy it into your into the Azure portal, and you can run that. And there's also this sign up with CA what if. So the what if scenario is an equivalent to the report only mode which we saw. And this lets you simulate exactly what a particular user would see if depending on his risk level, if he was to, run this. So if I run this now, it will tell me, I can exactly simulate that whether the user will be shown risk, a second factor or not a second factor, and things like that. And with this, I'll hand it over to Razi.
All right, so let's get started with looking into the risky users tab over here. And this will allow administrators to look into the risks associated with particular users. Now you can see that there are a couple of users here. We have the John Doe. This is the one that the user remediated the risk. So you can see that the risk state is now labeled as remediated. But as an admin, you do have certain options to perform administrative actions. For example, I can select a particular user and notice that as an administrator, I can confirm the user risk, so confirm user compromise. Now, this may be a need when you have some additional information that you wanted to take into consideration. You can also dismiss the user risk. This is very common when there is a false positive because of some reasons. If you select a particular user, you can actually also look into other actions, like, for example, blocking a particular user. This will completely stop them from going through user flow and custom policies. You can also reset the password. So depending on the situation, you have multiple options available to you. Now, if you scroll down here, you will notice there is a risk detections option. Now, this will list all the risks that are associated with the users for the sign-in. So whenever there's a sign-in and there's a risk got labeled, then it will basically show up over here. Now, this actually going to provide you specific details, like, for example, when, where, for example, the IP address, the location, the client. So you actually get quite a bit of details over here. You can also look at the history. So, for example, in this case, I'm looking at this admin account, try to find out what kind of a risk history this particular user have. If you go back here and select another user, maybe Andy here, this user tried to sign in and there was a risk detection type password spray. If I go and select the user detection here, they're also going to give me the history for this particular user. So you can go into these two options to get a little bit of a reporting, and you can also do administrative actions against a particular user or set of users. So this concludes this walkthrough, and so we go back to the presentation. When it comes to reporting, you may also want to use risk detections and conditional access dashboards based on Azure AD B2C logs. You can deploy these and various other dashboards as Azure Monitor workbooks, which are available on GitHub. Risk detections dashboards provide useful analytics about risk types, risk levels, and risk detections. A simple click-through experience provides ability to drill down from high-level risk events to specific details, including IP address, user location, region, etc. You can also search and filter risk based on various criteria. Similarly, Conditional Access Report provides analytics about conditional access policies which are applied during the user journey to remediate the risk. We will be covering Azure AD B2C reporting in detail in a future session.
Finally, here are the list of resources which you may find useful while working with identity protection and conditional access in Azure AD B2C.
To sum up, in this video, we started with an overview of risk detections, risk types, and risk levels in Azure Identity Protection for B2C.
Next, we discussed the role of conditional access and how to use it to remediate the risks. We also had a walkthrough to explore identity protection and ways to use conditional access in Azure AD B2C user flow and custom policy.
We also discussed reports available to administrators to investigate risky users and sign-in risk with ability to perform actions against those risk events. Additionally, Azure Monitor workbooks are also available, which provides enhanced analytics into risk detections and conditional access.
Finally, we shared links to useful resources which will help you understand the topics discussed in this video.
Thanks for watching this video.